If Moscow ever stops answering, somewhere a machine wakes up, not a person. A machine. And for the first time since 1972, there is no treaty capping the two largest nuclear arsenals on Earth. It isn't awake yet. Someone must switch it on. One correction. They called it perimeter. The dead hand is our name. Is it still on? Nobody has ever said. In December 2011, the commander of Russia's strategic missile forces was asked on the record. He said it exists, and it's on combat duty. And no government ever since has announced switching it off. That's the whole of what still on honestly means. It doesn't decide to end the world. It decides nobody is left to ask. And then it asks whoever it can still reach. And the rocket it launches isn't carrying a bomb. It's carrying a voice, climbing high enough that the wreckage underneath can't jam it, repeating one message to anything still able to answer. They drew a machine that needed no one in it, no one at all, and they backed away from it. This is the story of that argument, and of what they built instead. Soviet Nuclear Launch Authority sat at the very top of the chain, on purpose, one safeguard against a single rogue officer starting a war alone. But that same concentration cut a hole into the whole system. Kill the men at the top, and every warhead underneath them goes quiet. Thousands of them. Inert metal, waiting for an order that will never come. How do we know any of this? A newspaper page with a date. Bruce Blair published it in October 1993, built from interviews with the Russians who designed and ran the system. One of those designers, Yarynich, later gave the fullest account of all, a man who helped build a doomsday machine and then spent years describing it in public. The whole machine's DNA fits in 2 lines. In 1967, a scheme called Signal gave headquarters 30 pre-written orders it could transmit straight to missile units. Then, in August of 1974, the paperwork finally caught up with the idea. A government decree assigned the real version to a design bureau, a dated document, filed and numbered for the end of the world. Washington declared the Pershing II's range at 1,800 kilometers. Soviet specialists didn't believe that number. Being wrong wasn't worth it. They believed 2,500, far enough to reach Moscow in minutes. Nobody outside a handful of rooms could actually check which number was true, and the machine ahead was built against the number the Soviets believed, not the number Washington published. In October of 1983, the Soviet defense minister, Dmitry Ustinov, told a Warsaw Pact meeting exactly how he read the Pershing II. To Ustinov, it was a weapon for striking first, built to cut the head off the Soviet command before it could respond. The Soviets had their own word for it, a pistol held against Moscow's temple. And the clock itself was shrinking. Increasingly accurate American submarine missiles were cutting Soviet warning time, from roughly 30 minutes down to under 3. Getting it wrong would cost everything. 3 minutes to decide whether the world was ending, and to answer before the men who could give that order were dead. Beheadable in under 10 minutes leaves exactly 2 choices. Launches on a warning you cannot verify, and risk ending the world over a false alarm. Or build a way to answer back, even after you are already dead. Perimeter is the second choice, built to cool both sides' hotheads down. Its own designers didn't think of it as a doomsday machine. They thought of it as the only thing that could let a leader wait. December of 1975, design was finished, handed to a state commission, chaired by Lieutenant General Varfolomei Korobushin. Just a name, a rank, and a date. The frame for the argument that was about to happen inside that commission. Inside that room, they drew a machine that needed no one in it, at all. Full automation. No officer, no delay, no human hesitation anywhere in the chain. And then they had second thoughts. A false trigger was too great a risk. Andrian Danilevich said it plainly, on the record. Automatic triggers were judged too dangerous, and the idea was abandoned. What they built instead ends with human duty officers. They had the fully automatic machine, and they chose not to build it. And the man who chaired that commission is, himself, a source on the other side of its own argument. In 1992, Korobushin, the same Korobushin, publicly described a fully automatic system, the exact system his own commission had rejected. Nobody explains the contradiction. It's simply true, on the record, twice, a third voice, and a fourth. Vitaly Katayev called it not completely automatic. Viktor Surikov went further, naming the marshal who killed the automatic design outright. The men who actually built this thing do not agree with each other, in public, on the record, and nobody watching needs them to. So how do you deliver an order across a country that might already be burning? Ground antennas can be destroyed, but a rocket climbing high enough above the wreckage can't be jammed from below. So they took an intercontinental missile and converted it, stripped the warhead, and packed a radio transmitter in its place. Stabilized in flight by cold, compressed gas, fired from its own silo like any other missile. Between 1979 and 1986, they tested it 7 times, 6 fully successful, 1 partial. And this is the detail that separates this story from a rumor. During those tests, real long-range missiles were actually launched on commands that transmitter sent. They ran the whole thing that way, more than once. 13th of November, 1984. American intelligence is watching, and they track 2 Soviet missiles, fired 40 minutes apart. They file it as a routine test. It wasn't. It was the whole machine, running end to end for real. A war room giving the order, a relay rocket carrying it, a signal passed all the way to a distant silo. And nobody watching from the other side understood what they were looking at. January of 1985. Perimeter goes on combat duty. Dormant, but ready for decades to come. From here on, this isn't history anymore. It's a machine, doing exactly what it was built to do. Every step in order. It is still asleep. All it does is listen. Seismic shock, radiation, air pressure, light. And then it asks one question. Does Moscow still answer? Here's the step almost nobody includes. If the links hold and an hour passes with nothing else, it goes back to sleep. The doomsday machine has an off-ramp. If the link is dead, if Moscow genuinely doesn't answer, authority transfers. It skips every layer of command above it, straight to whoever is on duty. Reported as 3 men in a bunker deep underground. Hoffman's own words, those 3 would have to decide whether to launch the small command rockets. Nobody has ever said more than that. This is what asks a human actually means. And there's a catch to arming it, even at the top. The activation message has to carry a piece of the same code that's supposed to stop anyone lower down from launching without permission. To turn it on, the leadership has to hand over part of its own lock. And here's the record disagreeing with itself, dated honestly. In 1993, Blair himself wrote that only a small team needed to be present. The rest, he said, was totally automated. His words, that year. The fuller picture came later, from the designer who actually built the thing. There's a scene everyone half remembers from a certain film made in 1964. A war room, a doomsday device, and a general explaining, almost apologetically, that the whole point of a machine like this is lost if kept secret. Nobody in the audience blinks. Of course you'd tell people. That's supposed to be the entire threat. And for decades, that line has been the frame every writer reaches for. It's almost right. Almost. Because in 1995, the rocket that carried the first version of this machine, the one you've been watching this whole film, was formally withdrawn from service under the START Arms Treaty. The hardware went. The function it was built to carry did not. Here's the true version, the one the record actually supports. This machine was never built to frighten Washington. Nobody designed it to be discovered. It was built so the men in Moscow could do the hardest thing in a crisis. Nothing. Wait, guarantee that the answer still comes even after you're already dead and you never fire a war again on the strength of a warning light? And Valery Yarynich, the man who helped build it, the man you met earlier, gave his own reason for finally talking about it decades later. He wasn't confessing to anything. He didn't stop at describing what he'd built. In the years after, he spent his time arguing publicly that missiles on both sides should come off launch-ready alert altogether, the same danger seen from the other direction. He said the world needed to know. He meant it as a warning, because it was still in place. And then, the last step. The order goes out through a buried low-frequency antenna to command rocket complexes as far as 600 miles away. The command rockets fire themselves. Nobody at those sites needs to press anything. And each one spends roughly half an hour broadcasting the same message to anyone left standing who can still hear it. And here's the part that closes the loop this film opened with its first breath. The men actually stationed at the silos never get a vote. Blair wrote it plainly back in 1993. Field commanders may be completely bypassed. There's one more voice on the record, more recent than any of the others. In 2018, a former chief of the Strategic Missile Forces, Viktor Yesin, added a detail nobody before him had confirmed publicly. The system functions, he said, decades later, still exactly as designed. It has passed its own stages of preparation and verification. But, and this is the part that matters, it comes into use only if Russia's other nuclear forces have already been destroyed. Not first, not early. Last. This isn't a countdown clock ticking towards some deadline. It's a last resort, defined by a condition so extreme that reaching it would already mean almost everything else is gone. So here is where the story actually ends. The Soviet Union, the country this entire machine was built to avenge, stopped existing in December of 1991. It simply stopped. And nothing in the machine's design has any concept of that. It doesn't know the flag changed. It doesn't know the map changed. It was never built to know which country it serves, only to check one thing over and over forever. Does Moscow still answer? It's doing exactly what it has always done, waiting. For a morning nobody left alive will be around to describe. And through everything that's happened since, every leader, every treaty, every war, no one has ever come forward and said it's been switched off. See you next time.